We shall kickstart today's event with the release of a very special book. This book has been penned by Dr. Aruna Tole. Dr. Tole served as the head of occupational therapy in Tata Memorial Hospital until her retirement in 1999. She penned down her memories, her experiences and thoughts about her incredible journey as an occupational therapist in a book aptly named Enable. TMH is proud to release this book today. Dr. Tole passed away in 2013, and we are joined today by her immediate family for the book release. I would like to invite on stage Dr. Sudeep Gupta, Director, TMC, Dr. C.S. Pramesh, Director, TMH, and we are very, very proud and pleased to invite on stage Dr. Tole's family, her husband, Mr. Padmakar Tole, her son, Captain Prashant Tole, her daughter and co-author on the book, Dr. Shubha Tole, and Kalyani Sardesai, who is also a co-author of the book. May we have a round of applause, please. I would now request Dr. Pramesh to introduce to the audience the life and work of Dr. Aruna Tole.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Tata Memorial Center Hospital Day Oration Session. Today's oration session is very special to a lot of us who worked at the Tata Memorial at a time when Mrs. Aruna Tole was the head of the Department of Occupational Therapy. I had the privilege of working with her just before her retirement, and it's truly a pleasure to be present here on this occasion of the release of her book, which marks over 4 decades of experience in occupational therapy, but also has a very nice human element to it. And I must commend her co-authors, Dr. Shubha Tole, her daughter, and Mrs. Kalyani Sardesai, who got together to release this book. We started talking about this release almost 6 months back, and it is indeed fortuitous that we are able to time the release of this book with something that is very special and was very special to Mrs. Tole's life, which was the Tata Memorial Center, where she spent the large part of her career on. I had the privilege of getting a sneak peek at the book as well, just before the release, and I must tell you that it's a wonderfully penned ode to someone who's provided and offered so much of her life to the field of occupational therapy in general, but it also is a very interesting book, even if you're not an occupational therapist. Even for someone as a common man, it's a remarkable story of a woman's determination, and at a time which was, and to truly understand how remarkable she was, you have to put yourself 6 to 7 decades back when she started her career. It's very easy for us today to think of whatever her achievements have been as something that is fairly routine in today's world, but to truly imagine what was the then societal mores 70 years back, it's nothing short of a remarkable achievement. Her occupational therapy skills also need to be looked at in that, from that perspective. Put yourself again in the 1960s when she first joined the Indian Cancer Society, invited by Dr. Jasawala, who was again a pioneer in looking at many of these aspects which went beyond just cancer treatment, and one of our finest directors to date. What was again truly striking about Mrs. Tole's work has been the fact that she did not shy away from local problems and finding local solutions to address them. It was not that she was finding out completely different new aspects in occupational therapy. There were some solutions which existed in high-income countries, but which were completely out of reach for more than 90% of India's population. And the remarkable part of what she worked on was the fact that she adapted local solutions, low-cost solutions, very innovative methods of doing that. And when we trained as residents in this institution, many of you who trained with us, Kamran is here, many of you, the others are here, we would be met with one response from certain units, the breast unit, the bone and soft tissue unit, the gynecology unit, when we said that there was a specific problem which some of our patients faced, and it was, go to Mrs. Tole and she'll sort that out for you. So there was this mythical, magical wizard who was at the back of the occupational therapy department, to whom we could go through with all our problems, some things which were extremely difficult, which I'll show a very brief glimpse of. So breast prostheses were almost unheard of at the time that she worked here. And again, putting yourself back 7 decades back. And the cost of those breast prostheses, if you had to import them from outside of India, was prohibitive, and most patients in India were not able to afford it. So she came up with this indigenous breast prosthesis, and she never shied away from some of these problems. And imagine yourself working in the 1960s, when most women were taught that you're lucky if you survive your breast cancer, forget about the cosmesis or the dignity that rehabilitation would bring to you. And she was unafraid of taking the bull by its horns and said, even if the women undergo a mastectomy, let's give them back the dignity and the ability to integrate back into society. And she was able to come up with these very low-cost breast prostheses, which were truly life-transforming for the women with breast cancer diagnosed at that time. She was not, again, afraid to turn away and challenge societal mores. Women with cervical cancer, who were considered lucky to just survive the treatment, and to talk of things like sexuality at that point in the 1960s is nothing short of absolutely being revolutionary in her thought process. So she brought on the system of vaginal dilatation, which enabled women with cervical cancer, post-chemoradiation or radiation, to go through life not just as survivors with multiple problems, but to lead as normal a life as possible. This is a remarkable initiative that she brought on. Many of us know life of a post-laryngectomy patient is extremely difficult, and especially in countries like India, where a large proportion of patients with laryngeal cancer were illiterate. If you take away speech from their lives, you actually crippled them completely because they cannot read or write, unlike other societies. So effectively what used to happen after a laryngectomy was that their entire social life came to a standstill. There were prostheses which were available at the time, the well-known Blomsinger prosthesis, which enabled some of these patients to speak, but again was completely out of reach because of cost. So it came out with something very innovative, which was to use esophageal speech. So patients were taught to swallow air and burp it out in a way that it was intelligible and people could convey what they wanted to convey. And this is Mrs. Tole actually explaining and teaching esophageal speech to a patient after a laryngectomy. These might all seem very rudimentary and very archaic by today's standards, but if you put yourself in the 1960s, where effectively a laryngectomy meant that an individual's only way of communication was completely destroyed, this is nothing short of life transforming. Some of our solutions were very innovative, and were tailored to what the occupation of the individual was. So this is a coconut seller who's had an amputation after a malignancy. Just imagine the life of this person after the surgery is done, after she's cured of the malignancy. How does she integrate back into society? How does she get her job back? How does she make a living? So she came up with this very innovative way of using her feet instead of one of her arms, so that she could continue to cut coconuts and be able to sell them, thereby bringing her back to society in a way which respects the dignity of the patient. And this is, again, another example of how she used very thought-provoking and very innovative solutions. This is a person who's had a hip disarticulation, and most of us with functional limbs find it difficult to go through normal life and do things that we already do. But imagine life after a hip disarticulation, and to be able to sit and play on the tabla, something which is so integral and something so important to our lives, which has been taken away from them because of the surgery, and thanks to the rehabilitation that was offered, were able to get back to a normal life. We take all of these things for granted. The ability to drape a sari. Imagine the same ability to drape a sari without one arm. And this is someone being trained on how you could wear a 6-yard sari with just one arm and without any help. And similarly, something we take so much for granted, like braiding your own hair. Just imagine the life of this person without one arm, having to depend on others for something as basic as wearing your clothes and braiding your hair, and bringing this dignity and self-respect back to these individuals. So she was nothing short of a true genius at the time, looking at very innovative solutions for local problems. Cliched though as this might seem, she was someone, if you had to describe her in one way, way ahead of her times. I think things we take for granted today, for her to have been able to offer her patients the same level of functional care is nothing short of genius. Let me end by saying what a true privilege it has been to work with her, and to thank the family for having given us this opportunity to release the book, which is a true ode to an extremely forward-thinking person who worked and privileged this institution with her presence for several years and retired as the head of the Department of Occupational Therapy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we've all gotten a very vivid glimpse of her incredible work, passion, and grit. And with this, I'd now like to invite her daughter and co-author, Dr. Shubha, on stage to take us through the journey of the book. Thank you, ma'am.
It's an incredible experience for me to be part of my mom's book. I can't talk about my mom without shining with tears of pride and joy and inspiration. So forgive my emotion and in fact share in it. My mom's professional life had one clear focus: the patient. She brought to bear her off-scale creativity, magically flattened any hurdles by simply working the problem in front of her. Patients would come to her broken in body and in spirit, missing a limb or a breast or a jaw due to surgery, and at a loss in terms of how to live. She would talk about them at home. They were in fact part of our family, and her quest became part of the whole experience of being the child of Aruna Tole. She understood that the root of the problem was self-image and ability. She fabricated prostheses, as you have seen, for shoulders and breasts and arms and legs, but keeping functionality in mind. What use is a good leg prosthesis if the person can't squat on the floor to cook or play tabla or to use the toilet? She accorded everyone the same respect. The same respect. Be this the vendor who went the extra mile to source a softer resin of the right shade so that the prosthesis doesn't poke the patient and still looks like the patient's skin, or the senior doctor to whom she reported, who approved a wash basin in her tiny little original occupational therapy department so that she could see more patients and wash hands between each of them. All through the fittings and designings, she imbued in each patient a sense of self-worth, a sense of pride. She would quote from anything in her vast repertoire. She would quote from the Gita. She would quote from her own experiences. She would quote from examples that she saw around her. And she would bring the patient to see that life is a journey, and how we travel, the people we touch, the enrichment that we spread is what counts. She lived this life, and the patients she touched, who came to her broken, left regaining the will to live. I learned from her example. From her example, I simply watched and I saw that one shouldn't let one's job definition limit what one does in life. She exemplified this in occupational therapy. She, in fact, redefined the profession. The technical content of her book, Enable, is entirely written by her. In fact, the original manuscript that she left behind is available as a PDF, downloaded if you scan the QR code in the book. It has been my privilege, together with my co-author Kalyani Sardesai, to bring her personal story and journey to the public. And this is what we have brought in the first section of the book. To the public, to the student considering OT as a career, to other medical practitioners, so that they too may not let their job definition limit how they help their patients. We have added glimpses of who she was as a person, stories from people who were fortunate enough to be brought into her orbit, be it a vendor or somebody who knew latex technology or a lathe operator or an engineer, the engineers' workshops, their children, all became part of this. I'll end with a heartbreaking quote. When she worked with the children's ward in TMH, leukemia patients, whom she would dress up as little Krishnas with crowns and jewelry that she made for us when we were children in school. She would do plays and dramas, and they would forget their pains and troubles, and they would just play as little children do and role play and have costumes. And one of them poignantly asked her, Auntie, if your children get cancer, you'll bring them here only, no? She left us in 2013 and left the world a richer place. This book is her legacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think all of us are incredibly lucky to be a part of this book release today at TMH. And with this, I'd request all the dignitaries on stage to please come forward. And Dr. Pramesh, if you could release the first copy of this book. Thank you. May I now request everyone to please take their seats in the audience? Thank you so much.